Hey, Jesse.
Katie, how's it going?
Pretty good. I got some, I guess, unfortunate news this week.
Is it about a benign growth on your finger, or is it more serious than that?
Slightly more serious than that. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I used to have a job.
I did know that.
Yeah. So before we started this podcast, I was a staff writer at The Stranger, which is Seattle's only, I think at this point, alt weekly, although technically it was an alt biweekly. And when the pandemic hit, The Stranger, like basically every other media organization in the country, took a massive hit to our revenue. And so in early March, I volunteered to take a furlough. And I did this sort of like on a whim. Like my boss was sending out emails to everybody saying like, things are really bad. We're going to do a fundraiser. Like, share the link to the fundraiser if you can. And so just like totally on a whim, I just wrote him back and I said like, hey, if you have to do furloughs, like I'll be first in line. And I did this thinking that it was totally impossible that there were going to be furloughs. So it was an absolutely empty gesture. And then like 2 hours later, I got a call saying like, thank you for the offer. You're out of work for the next 8 weeks. So after that, a lot of other people were also laid off. And then so the 8 weeks came and went. And then this week, my former boss called me and said that my temporary furlough was now a permanent layoff. After my boss told me this, that I was laid off, this like the really hard part here was that I had this like long dream of walking out of the Stranger in just like a fit of rage at some point. And I can't do that anymore. The pandemic stole my dream of quitting in a fit of righteous indignation.
What? First of all joking aside, that does suck. You are an awesome journalist, and this is such a shitty time in our industry, and I'm sorry that happened. But I have to say, I'm a little bit curious. In this fantasy scenario where you stormed off in a rage, what would that have looked like? What would you have been enraged about?
So there was a lot, and I don't want to be one of those people who like, gets laid off or gets fired and gets like very bitter about it and spends the next like 10 years bitching about my former employer like it's a bad ex, which The Stranger does have sort of a long history of this. There's a Facebook group for bitter ex-Stranger staffers, and I hear that they actually like have get-togethers and parties. I don't think I will be invited to these, however, unfortunately. But there are, so I don't want to be one of those people. And the truth is, like, in some ways it was a really good job, but there were also, I did have some like real frustrations. There was like what I would call censorship going on the inside. Not often, but there were small things like, do you remember the Jussie Smollett thing?
I do.
Okay, so after Jussie Smollett claimed to have been like beaten by these like MAGA hat wearing, racists in the middle of the night in Chicago, my bullshit meter immediately went up. Like not even like he hadn't even like finished the sentence, and I was like, didn't happen. And so I had like, while the rest of the world was offering their condolences about this terrible hate crime, I immediately wrote a piece saying like we should not believe Jussie Smollett, and they wouldn't publish it. Which like later, I like my skepticism was validated. So there were things like that where like, I would have some opinion that I thought was a pretty like frankly anodyne opinion, and there would be a lot of pushback because the paper was like very progressive and like in a very progressive city, it's very homogenous, and my contrary opinions were not always welcome there. So I did have like a lot of frustration, but I don't want to like burn all of my bridges. I do, however, want to tell you one story that I think will illustrate a little bit what it was like to work there. So I should say before I tell this story that The Stranger was like my literal dream job. There's 2 places I've ever wanted to work in the world, and The Stranger was one of them. It was a big honor to work there, but it turns out that like dream jobs can also be nightmares at times. And so I think this illustrates it a little bit what it was like to work there. So when the pandemic started, there's a conservative radio show in Seattle. And I actually don't even know the name of the show, but it's hosted by this guy named Jason Rantz. And Jason is conservative. We agree on very little in terms of politics. But Jason asked his listeners to donate to the stranger. And he said, like, I think the stranger does like crap work, but they're an important part of like the local media landscape, and we need to have diversity of media. And so he asked his listeners to donate, and they did. And so we started getting donations from people who were like, I never read your paper. In fact, I hate everything that you stand for. But Jason Rantz asked me to donate to save your paper, so I'm doing it, which I just found like very touching.
Yeah, that's classy of him.
It was really classy. And like, not only would we never have done that for him, had his show or his station gone under, we would have celebrated it. I am 100% sure that somebody would have written a post crowing about Jason Rantz losing his job. And so I asked Jason after this if anybody from the paper thanked him, and nobody had said anything about it. And to me, it was just like, I was really embarrassed about it. And so I thanked them. I publicly thanked them because I'm not afraid to thank conservatives when they do something right just because they're conservatives. But I was just really embarrassed about that. Like, this guy is going out of his way to help us out, and we can't even like say thank you.
Right.
So anyway, it's over. I'm like pretty convinced that I'll never have a staff job in media again because there are no jobs. And even if there were jobs, I think I would have a hard time getting one, to be totally frank about it. So I have decided to go into my second career, my backup plan. I'm going to be a diversity trainer.
I think you'd be really good at that. I mean, first of all, you are diverse. You're a Jewish lesbian, gender nonconforming.
Non-binary woman.
First of all, like, I've been on Twitter too much during the pandemic, and just like every day there's new layoffs. There was BuzzFeed, there was Quartz. And it really sucks. And even when it's publications that like have lately started to drive me crazy, because what you described going on with The Stranger, I think, is a bit of a trajectory. And I've talked and written about that. It's just, there's less and less breathing room within progressive media to be a little bit, I don't know, original or critical. But still, just these jobs are not coming back. Like, journalism was already in a crisis. This really feels like a death blow. And it's so depressing to watch. And I'm very sorry you lost your job. And I too, I was thinking of when I was on staff at New York Magazine, it was a little different. I left before things got really bad to write a book. But part of me is just like, it's really unlikely I'll ever be in a situation again where I just have the full institutional support of an organization and the backing to do the stories that I want to do, and to know it'll be, I don't have to go broke doing it. So this whole thing is heartbreaking. And this is journalism's loss that you no longer have a staff job. So I hope against hope that you're able to find something.
Thank you. And I should also say that The Stranger did have my back in some ways. It was a place where, like, I historically have not been a person that like typically gets along with bosses. And this was sort of a reverse case where I actually did like get along with upper management well. But there was a lot of hostility, as you can imagine, basically from everybody under 40. You and I and a few, a number of other people sort of who occupy a similar space in the media landscape as we do are not liked, and it's not so much about sort of personality as it is like the things that we write. And it's weird. It's very strange to feel like a pariah because you like wrote an article critical of Me Too or something like that. It just feels very strange to think like, all right, all of these progressives around me would rather me not have a job.
Yeah. There's we've talked about this, but there's like I don't want to complain too much because like I'm still in a lucky position in many ways, but there's like a cruelty asymmetry where even the journalists I hate, who I think just are hacks, I would not pull a lever to make them lose their job. I don't want anyone to lose their job. I want people to do better as goes in the argot of our times, but
they would absolutely not return the favor for you.
I don't think so. At least, I mean, I have some people in mind who wouldn't, but yeah. What's well, now that you have extra free time, what's this podcast we're doing called?
This podcast is Blocked and Reported, the only podcast, and I'm Katie Herzog.
And I'm Jesse Single. And this week we're going to tie up some loose ends on the whole Chrissy Teigen, Allison Roman thing. Yes, there is more to say about it. We're also going to talk about this really epic tweet storm that sort of seems designed to make sure white people never do anything anti-racist ever again. I'll explain what I mean by that. I'm going to talk about how it ties into this concept of feel bad liberalism, and love to get your thoughts on that. But a little bit of housekeeping first. One of them is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the day most listeners listen to this, which is Monday, May 18th, it will be your birthday, correct?
Yes, it will be my birthday. How did you know that?
Let's just say we're Facebook friends.
You are a good journalist, Jesse.
Yeah, exactly. I tapped all my sources to figure out contacts in the State Department. I don't want to embarrass you or put you on the spot, but the last 6 months, I've put all my other projects aside to write you a birthday poem. So I collected the works. I studied the greats from Robert Frost to that other guy and that one girl. And yeah, could I just read you what I came up with?
Oh, please do.
This is called Happy Birthday, Katie by Jesse Singal. Okay, I might get a little emotional. Verklempt. Happy birthday, Katie. You are my co-host. Of all the lesbian podcasters, it's you I like the most. Remember that time when we riffed on the news, when we had so much fun and decided you were Jew-ish? Remember when all those people on Twitter got mad at us and we vaped on that bridge on the canal in Gowanus? It's your birthday. That's cool. I hope that it rules and that you don't suffer gladly fools and that someone gives you jewels. And even though journalism is crashing and burning, I hope that our friendship will keep right on churning. That's it. That's the whole thing.
Jesse, that is beautiful. I think that you should quit writing your book on the replication crisis and just shift to poetry.
I did. I canceled the book contract so I could work on that poem.
Yeah. Maybe Jesse's Poetry Corner should be a regular feature of the podcast.
JPC?
Yeah, JPC. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That was probably the only present that I'm going to get. So very much.
Well, let's get right into it. So last week we talked about Allison Roman and Chrissy Teigen, and two loose ends I want to tie up. One is an email from a listener, and the other was Roman apologized. So let me start with this email, which I fucking lost. Give me one sec. Okay, so our listener Chris sent us what I thought was a thoughtful email, and I'm curious what you think about this. One of the tweets we were dismissive of, the author of the tweet storm rather said, quote, Chrissy Teigen has had to tap dance backwards in high heels to corner a fraction of the market share affluent white women with palatial New England farmhouse estates have had courted since the 80s because she is a woman of color. So Chris says, we didn't mention that tweet. He basically wants to know if we disagree with that. If we disagree with the idea that Chrissy Teigen has had to work a lot harder just to have a fraction of the success as an affluent white lady. What do you think of that?
I just don't know the evidence to back up that claim. I don't know how hard Chrissy Teigen works. As far as I know, until sort of recently, she was a model and a wife and a mom. And she was famous because of this sort of internet presence. She was discovered when she was in high school. I'd say she certainly had fewer barriers than ugly people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. We know who she is because she's beautiful. I mean, and nobody talks about beauty privilege, but she absolutely has that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a good thing. She's beautiful.
Yeah.
Is Chrissy Teigen harder working than Gwyneth Paltrow? I have no idea. And I don't think anybody, who doesn't work directly with them could be able to answer that. What do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so I'm of two minds. One is that, I actually do believe there is such a thing as implicit bias and that we're all susceptible to it. The problem is, I think there's this flattening going on. And part of what we were responding to was this idea that Chrissy Teigen is a capital W, capital O, capital C woman of color. It's this oppressed category. And that by dint of being in that category, she's automatically the bullied or the oppressed in this situation. And to me, I believe her background is she had a Norwegian American dad and a Thai mom. I think in the 60s or 70s, someone who looked like her, who is mixed race, would have had a very hard time. In our world, she was noticed as a high school cheerleader and very quickly became successful. So the question is, I guess you could really galaxy brain this and say, would an equally attractive white cheerleader have been as successful. It's hard for me to. I know we're supposed to say that it's obviously true that she was harmed by her race, and I think I looked up sort of what she said about it. She said some touching things about like sort of not knowing where she fits in, being biracial. I'm sure along the way people have made mean comments to her and that she's been microaggressed and stuff. I don't know. When I think of like racism, I think of structural racism. I think of what Black and Latino people in particular have real obstacles on average that white people don't have. And I guess I just don't see that here. And I know some people would say that sort of makes me ignorant or a bad person, but I'm just a little bit confused by the claim, I think.
Yeah, I would love to see some evidence. I mean, if whoever tweeted that has some evidence that Chrissy has put in more hours and has gotten fewer rewards than equally attractive white women, I'd love to see it. But I don't think she's particularly made that claim herself.
No, I'm actually fairly orthodox progressive on a lot of race stuff. I really do think like there's still tremendous obstacles, and the racial wealth gap is like crazy. White families have 10 times as much money as Black families. There's also like in some quarters, people want it to be the case that things are just as bad as they ever were. And like I was watching a clip of Teigen where her husband John Legend was filling in for Ellen, and then she made a surprise appearance. So you have a brilliant Black musician married to a model who is Thai Norwegian filling in for a talk show hugely popular hosted by a butch lesbian, and that's increasingly what America is in 2020. And I think that's awesome. It shows that we have made progress. And I think it's just hard to extract from like a situation like this much racism. There's a lot of racism out there. It's just like you need to look where it actually is.
This sort of reminds me of the racial dynamics around something like Me Too, right? Where the focus is all around these sort of hyper privileged cases, people in the media, women who are celebrities, people that we've all heard of. Whereas I suspect that where you really see, the greater effects of things like racism and oppression and prejudice is at the bottom of the rung, not at the top of it.
Yeah.
But that's, but we're talking about Chrissy Teigen and not, like all of the nameless people who experience racism that we would never heard of. There's one other element that I forgot to mention last time. So Chrissy Teigen, I really like her. I think she's really charming. She apparently also has a long history of being a bully and being a bully to children. This woman, just like a month ago, this woman named Courtney Stodden, who I had never heard of before, came out with this story about how when it was like in 2011, in the early 2000s, this girl was 16 years old and she married some 50-year-old. So she's basically like a teen bride. And Christy, who she'd never apparently interacted with, like hated this woman and really like went on this like insane, unhinged bullying campaign against a 16-year-old girl. And so this woman just actually like released a song about it, a song about being bullied by Chrissy Teigen. So I suppose she's trying to capitalize on this. And I haven't actually seen this stick to Chrissy Teigen at all. But there have been multiple cases of this where she's like has documented like started pylons and then continued to like bully children.
Oh my God.
So I don't know. It's just like
she released a song. Yeah. She released a song about it.
Yeah, she released a song about it. I think it's called Bully.
It's cloud chasing all the way down.
It really is. Everybody's a victim and everybody's a bully. And maybe the 16-year-old really did deserve to get bullied. I don't know. Anyway,
what do you think of Alison Roman's apology? Because she said, I'm reading from it here, "I'm a white woman who has and will continue to benefit from white privilege, and I recognize that makes what I said even more inexcusable and hurtful. The fact that it didn't occur to me that I'd singled out 2 Asian women is 100% a function of my privilege. Being blind to racial insensitivities is a discriminatory luxury." Yeah, what is she saying that because she has to say it, or do you think she really thinks that?
Maybe both. I mean, I don't think she had to say that. I think what she should have said is like, I spoke out of turn. It was rude and insensitive of me to call out these women, and it wasn't racist. I would have had a lot more respect for her if for one thing, like apologizing very, very rarely makes these things go away. And I saw like a lot of people said that her apology was like, this was an exceptional apology because she had like really like bended bent down so far. But no, I mean, it read like a fucking like a hostage statement.
Yeah, it's so weird to me that like we're in a cultural moment where it's like almost more beneficial to say, "Yep, I'm racist," than it is to deny it. It's just like, I guess this whole thing, I think it sort of trivializes racism a little bit, but that's probably. Do either of us have more to say about this? I feel like it was a fascinating moment, but it's like it feels like it was like 2 years ago this happened now.
Right. This idea that she's like, that anytime you criticize a woman of color, especially the like women of color who have power and prestige, it's automatically racist. I just don't understand who's going to benefit from this rule in society.
Calling Marie Kondo, who grew up in one of the most ethnically homogenous countries in the world, as a member of the majority group, calling her a woman of color is just such like a source of confusion. I mean, it's just like I don't know. It's just the language is way too flattening.
I wonder if Marie Kondo is even aware of this of this controversy.
It turns out Marie Kondo is just incredibly racist, so she just
yeah, totally. She's probably racist against Chinese people.
All that stuff about like cleansing your apartment and getting rid of stuff you don't need, that's all euphemism.
The final solution.
The final solution to clutter. All right, should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Enough of those.
Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about was I came upon this like pretty amazing, very viral tweet storm. So this tweet storm is by a woman named Ali Henny. She's like online activist type. As always, we'll link to it in the show notes. Here's how it starts. This is related to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, this horrible murder in Georgia. But Ali Henny goes, I've noticed that with every killing of an unarmed black person, there are white folks who decide that they want to, quote, fight racism. I'm not here trying to kill your vibe. I'm happy you're here, but it's also time for some honesty. So let's sit down and have a chat. Then she says, gestures toward my kitchen table where there's a pot of hot water and tea bags waiting. So this like very popular tweet storm just proceeds to like, basically she's talking to someone who is, hypothetically expressing an interest in helping and making sure these horrible shootings don't happen again. And it's like the whole thing is just berating this hypothetical white person who wants to help. And, she keeps calling them child as in child. She keeps talking about their white fragility, basically telling them they're white supremacists, even though they're not trying to be. And this whole thing just like, it was such a good example of this. I don't think I was the first to like raise this concept, but I do think I coined this term of feel bad liberalism. And I haven't written about this yet, but I put it in a tweet storm last year. It's basically like this brand of liberalism where the goal seems to be to want to make people feel like shit. And it induces like self-flagellation. Like she's writing for an audience of the same kinds of white women who would like pay Syra Rao to come to their dinner and help them unpack the racism. It's like people seeking out self-flagellation or other people flagellating them. And I just think it's so bankrupt and so designed to just like get people to buy more training and buy more books. And sure enough, at the end of this woman's tweet storm, she like puts her Venmo information. Am I sort of like, I don't know. I mean, I know you don't like this stuff either, but sometimes I'm more like, should I just ignore it? Is it online bullshit? It feels like so much of the present way we talk about injustice is this stuff of just like trying to make people feel like shit, but not in a way where they're going to want to become involved. Because I feel like someone new to like the struggle for racial justice who comes upon this tweet storm is going to be like, well, fuck this. I'm not looking for someone to like berate me.
Right. Although I think a lot of people are looking for someone to berate them, oddly enough. This, like, I remember the first time I heard of anti-racist training. So this was probably like 10 years ago. And the first time I heard this term, I had friends in the queer community that I existed in who would go to San Francisco every year for these anti-racist trainings. And I thought that the whole thing sounded insane at the time. And now anti-racism is an industry. I mean, there is a lot of money in these diversity trainings and these, implicit bias trainings, and whether or not they actually work is a whole other conversation. But it's definitely an industry. Like about a year ago, I had coffee with a young wannabe journalist in Seattle. And so this person, non-binary, they, told me that after graduation, I was like, what are you gonna do when you graduate? And they said something like, well, if I can't get a job in journalism, I'll probably just go into diversity training. And they said this as though when I was getting out of college, I would have said well, if I can't get a job in journalism, I'll probably get a job at a restaurant or a coffee shop or something like this. It was the default backup plan was diversity training. And apparently this is a thing. This is what young people can go into now and get a job. And, you can't fault them for that. People need work, but it is absolutely an industry. And I would love to know how much of this industry has actually has this had any positive impact? Do these diversity trainings have any positive impact on anything? I mean, you know more about this than I do. What does the data say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been working on a piece about the stuff that sort of got tabled just because of that whole pandemic thing. And no, basically all the research, there's very little research to show this or that approach works. And worse than that, a lot of the more cutting edge stuff, they don't even bother to test it. It's just it's assumed it works. And especially in the case of the more confrontational stuff, you could absolutely see it having the exact opposite of the desired impact. Because what you're saying about women who seek it out, that's women who are already liberal or see themselves as part of the struggle.
Right.
This tweet storm is specifically directed at someone who's entering this stuff for the first time. And it's just not the way to go about it.
This idea that, you can shame people into changing their behavior or changing the way that they feel about race, it doesn't work. And people continue to try to use it as though you can somehow shame somebody into believing what you want.
Yeah. I mean, I think don't you think shame can work if it comes from people you actually care about and sometimes who are members of your community, sometimes if it's done in the right way, but it's a double-edged sword. It's very easy to if you shame someone for them to have a defensive reaction and just be fuck you.
Right. I mean, that's the effect that shame has on me. I am impervious to shame. If somebody attempts to shame me, it's not going to make me change my behavior. It'll probably make me double down. And maybe I'm a less sophisticated thinker than the intended recipient of this tweet thread, but I sort of doubt it.
Yeah. When I tweeted about this and wrote about it in my newsletter, all these people are citing Nietzsche or certain religious traditions. I think there's an aspect of human nature where it feels good to say, I'm a piece of shit. I lie in judgment of you, whether you is God or just someone who has authority over you.
Right. I mean, that's extremely fun, especially feeling morally righteous. Yeah. I mean, who is the tweet thread really meant for? Is it meant for people who need to be educated on anti-racism, or is it just meant for that woman and all of her friends to, pat themselves on the back? We live in such echo chambers that I would be interested to know in how many actual racists this tweet storm even reached.
Well, no, it's for her and her friends, but it's also there's no shortage of white liberal women who want to be told they're bitches and that they're terrible people and that they need to do better. That's the market for the Robin DiAngelo approach. And I don't think it actually improves anything.
Well, I think it has improved life greatly for Robin DiAngelo.
That's true.
So Robin DiAngelo lives in Seattle, or at least she was a professor at the University of Washington. And last year at The Stranger, in the springtime, we do these sort of vacuous women in power episodes or issues. And it's just puff pieces. And I really wanted to write about Robin DiAngelo because that is a woman with power. And I wanted to inspect look at the actual data and has her anti-racist training actually done anything, because she's an incredibly beloved figure locally, but instead my editor made me write about someone who provides abortions.
There's been very little critical coverage of her approach, because I read her book for this article I'm working on, and we're gonna discuss this in an upcoming segment. We'll be talking about this episode. Don't worry, I'll explain that shortly. But yeah, there's elements of what she does that's very crazy and radical where you just wouldn't expect it to work. It's just people write a lot of puff pieces about her. So I would have read the shit out of a Katie Herzog, actual critical look at what she does.
I wanted to get into her house. That's what I really wanted to see. Does she have African masks on her walls? I think that'd be highly problematic.
Oh my God.
There was do you remember, I think it was Actually, I don't remember when. Sometime last summer, Khalif Asane at the New Yorker wrote a great review of Robin DiAngelo's book, or Robin DiAngelo's work.
Yeah, it was her book and Ibram X. Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist. This is like a searing review essay. We'll link to it in the show notes, but everyone should read it because the New Yorker also ran a total puff piece review of DiAngelo's book by a white woman. The author of this other critical book review essay is not white. So it's just like the dynamics that were very interesting. All right. So before we wrap up, we have somewhat big programming note, which is we have launched our Patreon at patreon.com/blocked and reported. And the basic idea here is for now, we are keeping this weekly podcast free. If you like the podcast and you don't want to pay for more, keep doing what you're doing. This will show up in your feed every Monday. If you want more, we have 2 tiers, $5 a month. You get 2 extra episodes a month. And by the time you listen to this, one of those will already be up. So you'll be able to just sign up and listen to an extra segment we're doing on what is coincidentally another diversity related story involving Google and sort of tying back to the infamous Google memo and all that. So you might enjoy that. That's the $5 tier. The $10 tier is you get those 2 extra episodes, and we're doing these group chats once a month and a Ask Me Anything feature once every 2 months. And, this is all just us seeing how big we can grow this thing. We've been really happy so far with the listenership, and especially if it does grow, we're likely to add more perks and more features, maybe more tiers. But yeah, we sort of soft launched the Patreon earlier today, and we've been really happy with the response so far. And it's tough times economically, so we totally appreciate you just listening if you can't sign up right now. But we're really excited to be able to do some extra stuff. And if you are potentially interested in listening and you have some feedback on the kinds of stuff that, would make you more likely to shell out 5 or 10 a month, please email us at blockedandreportedpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter at @thebarpod. Continue rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, of course.
Yeah, and I think, it's possible that if we get a lot of Patreons or subscribers, we'll have some additional tiers for like the real high value spenders, like foot pics for one, your foot pics, of course. I can send nude pics of my dog. I would also be willing to tell people the name of my blog that I had when I was in my early 20s. And you could that would be like the premium, like the $1,000 a month tier. I could give you that. And then for like $5,000, I'll tell you the name of the band I was in.
You were in a band?
So I'm not very musical, but I used to be, and this is extremely surprising to people who know me now, but I used to be wild and extremely fun. And so I was in a band, and my job in that band was to dance topless wearing a horse head mask.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, there's video, and for $10,000 a month, I will tell you the name of the band.
So this is quickly basically just going to degenerate into pornography, isn't it?
I mean, it's not sexual enough to be pornographic. It's more disturbing than sexual. Yeah. Like I wore like nude pasties, so I looked like and I don't have very big breasts anyway, so I look sort of like the Marilyn Manson, like nippleless, featureless, wearing a horse head mask. But I did this like for a shockingly long time, and we played like big venues around North Carolina, and actually went to South by Southwest at one point.
That's okay. At some point, we're gonna have to get into more of these stories of yours, because I think you have more wild youth stories than I do. But this is the kind of stuff you could have access to. We already had one person very generously sign up at the $20. You can you can pay as much as you want, but Alexandra, thank you so much. $20 a month is incredibly generous.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we again, even if you can't subscribe, you will continue to hear this podcast every week. And yeah, we're looking forward to doing more.
Thanks for listening.
This has been Blocked and Reported. I'm Jesse Singal, and remember, all our listeners are exactly the same, but the ones who give us money are even more the same.
And I'm Katie Herzog. And also remember, it's always racist to criticize a woman of color unless she voted for Donald Trump.